Welcome back to VUDivulged, everybody. I'm Blake Gardner.
I'm Anthony Polkowski.
And we're going to deviate from a lot of what we've been talking about lately, whether that was gaming or current events or Waco, because it got cold pretty fast. There is an article out now by the Washington Post that says Halloween cold snap over lower 48 is setting records, and they are not kidding.
I mean, look at this heat map, everybody. 80 degrees in Florida. Like, I don't even remember Florida being like under 90 whenever I've gone. And if you look at North Dakota, -4, and even California, one area got 37 degrees. Like, it got cold quick. I remember I was walking to class one day and like I was in a t-shirt, and then literally the next day I was in a thick jacket because it got cold.
Up here in Indiana, we haven't had it too bad. Right now, it's in the 30s, which is still a little too cold for my liking, but we'll be okay. So we just kind of wanted to go over some of the tips for staying warm, keeping your car running, keeping your pipes okay, just to make sure that everybody is safe, warm, and able to see their family on the holidays.
Like you said, with the holiday season coming around, everybody's going to be traveling. I remember a long time ago hearing about how Thanksgiving was actually the most traveled day throughout the year, like that time period, because not everybody celebrates Christmas, not everybody celebrates Hanukkah, but Thanksgiving seems to be like one of the biggest holidays that everybody celebrates, so everybody's traveling during those days. So with it getting cold, and in some states they're going to start seeing their snow, I think it's important to get these safety tips out there before the major cold comes. That way you guys can appropriately prepare for it.
So this is an article actually from the National Weather Service, and if you look up the National Weather Service cold weather safety tips, it'll be one of the first things to pop up. It's a PDF download. If you want to print it out, put it in your fridge so your kids can see it, or if you want to keep it in your dorm room. It's just some really good tips. So number one is wear layers of loose fitting and lightweight warm clothing. So long johns is a really good example of that. Under your clothing if you're going to be working outside. And what is your primary choice of warm clothing, Anthony?
My primary choice is actually this thick jacket I got as a Christmas gift one year, because it's very fuzzy, but the arms are really thick, so the wind doesn't come up. And windbreakers is because most of the time it's really the wind chill that gets people. Like, just the cold, fine, but that wind chill, it can get in your clothes and or blow through your clothes if your clothes aren't thick enough, and that can cool you off faster than the actual cold itself.
I'm a big Carhartt guy myself.
You're a big Carhartt guy?
Big Carhartt guy.
I don't really have a specialty brand, but windbreakers.
Yeah.
One thing I think we should also point out is you do want to dress thick, but you don't want to, with thick clothing, but you don't want it to be too thick to the point where you're sweating. Because, let's say, my family, we go hiking a lot, and during the winter, we even, hike through state parks when they're all white and nice. It looks amazing. But one thing we make sure is, yes, we dress warm, but not to the point where you're sweating too much, because we then go out to eat, or we'll have a picnic in the back of the car, right? And if you're sweating and you're sweating and you're sweating, drenched in sweat, when you're moving around, that's fine when you're outside, because your body's generating heat, so it's fine. But once you stop and your body temperature cools down, that sweat, since it's cold outside and the sweat's water, then turns to ice. And that will cool you off even faster. And now your warm clothing is actually freezing you faster.
To add on to that, actually, one of the things my father always said was never put your too warm clothes on inside. So what he meant by that was, grab your jacket, but always make sure that, some people, they want to warm up in their warm clothes before they go outside. It's actually less effective if you try to put all of that on and then go outside after a little while. You want to put it on as you go, and then you'll stay warmer faster and longer. So we'll go ahead and move on to the second tip for being outside, and that is wearing a hat. Try to stay dry and out of the wind. Those last two are pretty self-explanatory, but wearing a hat, you lose a lot of heat through your head, which is why people will wear beanies in the winter. I personally wear a lot of beanies. I think they're great. They make the hair look good, if that makes sense.
I wish I could relate to that. Also, the ears. I find my fingers and ears get cold quick. So, yeah, definitely a warm beanie really really helps. Like, or even a hood of a windbreaker too. Just something to stop that, cold air from getting like blown down your sleeve, like a scarf. That works too.
A scarf, turtleneck.
Yeah.
If you feel like wearing a turtleneck. So number 3 is cover your mouth to protect your lungs from extreme cold. I know I've been skiing before, and that was a great experience, but I was not wearing that protective layer over my mouth, and I paid for that dearly. My ribs hurt, my chest hurt, my lungs hurt. Anybody who's played some sports in the cold knows what that's like. I played a lot of football in the cold, and you get to the point where you're taking big raspy breaths, and it hurts so bad because it's just cold. So if you are outside and it's pretty cold out, just maybe take a minute and get one of the gaiters to cover your mouth. And number 4 on the outside work list is mittens snug at the wrist are better than gloves. They're insulated better normally, and your hands aren't as individualized. So you can radiate heat from your hands, but as you individualize your fingers, it just
it's no different than like when you're cold and you like bring your arms to your chest to keep that heat in. It's the same principle, but with your fingers separate, they're all losing heat, but together they all kind of help keep each other warm. So I think another few tips we should cover are like driving tips. Once again, it's the holiday season, and driving in dangerous weather is. It's no joke, especially when you're going at high speeds in a 4,000-pound machine. It can be pretty dangerous. So one example for me is it was raining, but same philosophy applies. Because during heavy snow you can't see. It was raining when I was actually coming back to school. I was at home for whatever I was doing at home, and I was coming back to school, and it was like clear weather when I left. And then I got to Brown County, which is like this real hilly area, and it started to pour with these like high winds. And the speed limit is actually like 45 in that area. I remember I was going 25 because I couldn't see, and I actually came up on the crest of a hill, and right when I came down, there was just this big pile of branches that had gotten blown down, about half the size of my car. I would have crashed into those if I hadn't been going the speed limit because I couldn't see. And then on the second half of the drive where it's really, really flat, flat, like for an hour, there is nothing but corn and soybeans, except for one gas station directly in the middle. That's when the rain really started pouring. I could not see 3 feet in front of my car, and I was going 70 miles an hour. I remember I literally said, I'm going to pull over in the shoulder, and I'm going to sit because I can't see. I can't see anything. And as I was pulling over to the side, I started to listen for the rumble strips because, like I said, I couldn't see anything. I could only see 5 feet. And I was like, this is taking a lot longer for me to get into the breakdown lane than I thought. Well, I had realized after I got into the breakdown lane, my vision was so obscured because keep in mind my windshield wipers were going full speed. I had actually drifted into the left lane without even realizing it because I couldn't see. And the same thing applies in blizzards too, because that snow, it can block your vision just as easily as rain. So I literally just pulled on the side of the road. I think I waited there for like 15 minutes for the rain to go down because I could not see in front of me, which actually reminds me of a tip. Never use your high beams during snow when it's snowing outside. Everybody uses, their high beams to see more at night. You actually want to use your regular headlights or low beams if you have them, because the snow and rain, if you use your high beams, will actually reflect the light back to you, making it actually harder to see. You think you can see more clearly because it's brighter, but in reality, you can see closer up front. Yes, you can see the snow in front of you, but you can't see farther back, which you need to drive if you're going to make, split-second decisions like an animal crossing the road or something. Other traveling tips is keep an emergency kit in either your back seat or your trunk. If you're going to keep it in your trunk, make sure you can access it without leaving your vehicle. Whether it be, sometimes people can just throw it right behind them. Some people, they can lower the seats in their car, but just make sure your kit is accessible, like I said, without getting out of the car. So during summertime, we keep, the standard, jumper cables and the tire changing equipment or whatnot. But during the winter, we make sure we keep a thick blanket. We keep like granola bar, non-perishable foods in our car. Just not a whole lot. Just like I said, just a box of some granola bars that we change every 6 months. Just to make sure there's some food. And well, usually if the drive is any longer than an hour, I usually have a drink that I brought with me, whether it be water, pop, or something. Because you might want to think if you're stuck behind traffic, because it's snowing outside. Let's say there's a wreck and now traffic's backed up for miles. You might want to keep your car running for heat, yes, but if you're there for hours, all you're doing is just burning gas, and you don't know how long you're going to be there. And then if you run out of gas, the traffic may clear, but now you're stuck there.
I don't know how much traveling you do on the holidays, Anthony, but I'm a big solo traveler, so I spend a lot of time in the car. I go for the week of Thanksgiving. I travel on the 2 worst days of the year, is what I always say. So I traveled the night before Thanksgiving, and I have to travel through St. Louis to get to my father's house. And then I travel back. There's obviously a point where I come back from Thanksgiving because that wouldn't make sense. But I travel down there the week before Christmas, and I travel back on Christmas Eve to get to my grandparents in time. So I spend a lot of time on the road, especially in the city of St. Louis. That is the worst spot to be when it is snowing, I promise. But you're right. There are some big vehicle preparation things you can do, especially now before it actually gets to the point where it is too cold to even want to go outside and do it. Right now I think it's like 40-something degrees. So vehicle preparation, check your battery, get it tested. If you know how to test it, great. If you don't, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, they'll test your battery for you. Check your fluids, so your coolant, your wiper fluid, oil, etc. Check your tires. Always have a tire pressure gauge in that box that we were just talking about. You said jumper cables and a thick blanket, which are 2 of the big ones on here. Also, to note, check your gas, like how much gas you have. And I always took the time to get like the de-icer for the windshield.
Oh, yeah.
That way, because I don't know how it works. I'm not even going to try to explain how it works. I just know it's magic and it can, because you spray it on and then your ice is gone. So
even if it's super thick, you just spray it on, wait 10 seconds, and it scrapes right off, which is another thing. We have 3 cars in my family, and every winter we make sure every single one of those cars has an ice scraper on it. That way, just in case we get stuck in traffic.
I don't think mine ever actually comes out, to be perfectly honest with you.
Oh, I think we've only brought it, like, when not at home, I think we've only brought it out like maybe twice in my entire life. But it's you'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. But yeah, that fuel, especially because if you're stuck in traffic or in heavy snow, the gas station might not be an option, and now you're stuck there. There is no we'll wait this out. You're stuck there until you get help.
Snow sticks. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Which brings to another safety tip is if your drive, I would say, is going to be longer than, it's up to you and your discretion, but I'd say if it's longer than 30 minutes, tell someone where you're going.
Yeah, let somebody know where you're going.
Every time I leave home or I leave school to go home or to school, I always tell either my mom or my dad, or if they're not available, one of my friends, saying like, hey, I'm leaving now. That way, and they know it takes about 2.5 hours for me to get back. So they know if it's been 3.5 and they haven't heard from me, it's pretty serious. I remember when that story where I said I pulled over to the side of the road, I actually did call one of my parents and said, hey, I pulled over on the side of the road. Nothing, the car's not damaged or anything. I just can't see. I'm waiting till the weather clears up. That way, when they saw that it took me nearly 4 hours to get home, rather than the 2.5, they didn't freak out. I'm safe. I pulled over on the side of the road. I'm just waiting it out.
I won't even lie. I'm normally pretty good about I'm leaving now, or I'm on my way home, or I'm headed this direction. I am terrible at when I get to the destination. I never ever respond with, hey, I made it here safe. I just forget. I get so quick.
I sometimes do that when I go home, because I don't text them, because I'm at home, so I always just think I'll tell them when they're here.
Yeah. So some other ones that I have on here that I thought were pretty important, animal and pet safety. So this is up to discretion on you. Some dogs really like to be outside in the winter.
Huskies.
Some dogs are designed to be, work dogs, and they're not supposed to be, when you bring them into the house, they can lose a lot of the training that they have, and they're Some dogs are built that way.
Mm-hmm.
So for your normal pets, bring the pets inside, provide shelter and fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
This is really basic stuff, I feel like, but keep the salt away from the paws if you can. It's really bad on them,
Mm-hmm.
and it can get stuck up in the little crevices. Just another thing to note there is remember that if your pet's going, like in the city of Vincennes, I have to take my dog out every time he wants to go out. So make sure not only he is like I make sure that he is ready to go outside, but I also make sure that I'm ready to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jacketed up. I'm somewhat warm going out because I don't want to freeze.
Yeah, some dogs, like I said, husky, they really enjoy the cold. This is also part of, you just need to know what your pet is, especially dogs, because like some breeds, like you said, handle the cold much better than others. Like huskies love the
Great
cold.
Pyrenees.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how many like videos I've seen of like husky owners telling people about it, because people will go, why are you just letting your dog outside and freeze in the snow? Bring them inside. And they go, the dog door's right there. The husky's right there. He can come in at any time. They choose to be outside because the huskies have thick fur. They love the cold. That's why the more southerner you go in the world, or more towards the equator, they don't really recommend you having a husky as a pet, because you're gonna have keep that fur down, because they'll easily overheat.
So one of the other sets of tips I have for wood burning stoves, fireplaces, and heaters. This is moving more to the inside of the house stuff. My family has a wood boiler system that powers everything just by the heat of the wood. So number one is always keep a screen around an open flame. Number two, never use gasoline to start your fireplace, please.
Or lighter fluid.
Never burn charcoal indoors. Do not close the damper when ashes are hot. I feel like that's a pretty easy one too. For those of you that have fireplaces and wood stoves, you'll understand that. 5, use only safe sources of alternative heat, such as a fireplace, small, well-vented wood or coal stove, or portable space heaters. Always follow manufacturer's instructions.
Which those were quick. When you said portable, that reminded me. This is another like car tip or outside tip that reminded me of those like little hand warmers. Those like chemical hand warmers you like shake and they warm up. We keep a few of those in our car. I forgot to mention that earlier. And most of the time they stand in there, and we always make sure to only use the emergency car stash as an emergency car stash. Like if like I said, we're going on a hike. Yes, we may have hand warmers in the car, but we'll go out and buy more, because that emergency stash is the, oh no, we need these, not the. Don't ever use your emergency stash for like,
basic every day.
Your emergency stash stays your emergency stash. We'll only use it when it's starting to warm up, because we're like starting to warm up, we're fine.
Some other notes I've got here, and I know my family did a lot of these growing up, and I'm sure a lot of people out here as well do too. To keep your pipes from freezing on an outside wall, let hot and cold water trickle or drip at night from the faucet. Open the cabinet doors to allow more heat to get to uninsulated pipes under a sink or near an outer wall. Make sure heat is left on and set no lower than 55 degrees. If you plan to be away, have someone check your house daily to make sure that heat is still on to prevent freezing. Drain and shut off water system, except indoor sprinkler systems. So if your pipes freeze, make sure you and your family know how to shut off the water in case the pipes burst. Never try to thaw a pipe with an open flame or torch. Use a hairdryer instead. Always be careful of the potential for electric shock in and around standing water. And this plays into the next one really well, because if your heat quits or whatever, you need to make sure you know all of these things as well. So installing a carbon monoxide detector is important, because sometimes the power is out. Never run a generator indoors. Open a window slightly when using a kerosene heater and follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never use a gas oven to heat your home. And if your heat goes out, you can keep warm indoors by closing off rooms you do not need, dressing in layers of lightweight clothing, and wearing a cap.
Yes, and real quick, I think we should take a moment to really emphasize the necessity of a carbon monoxide detector. What people don't realize is there are many different types of gases, natural gas, you mentioned kerosene, that can come into your home. And some of them you can smell. Carbon monoxide, ladies and gentlemen, is a odorless, tasteless gas.
Kills about 1,000 people each year.
And what people don't realize is people think, well, I'll notice if I have a headache. That's not how carbon monoxide poisoning works. You might get a headache, but most of the time you actually start feeling tired. So people then, will go on their couch or bed and they'll go, I'll just take a quick nap because I guess I've just worked myself too much today. Well, no, you're actually suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. You're not actually tired. You need to get out of that house and open the doors and vent it. Yes, you want to keep your heat, but that carbon monoxide is going to make it worse.
Yeah.
I remember me and my family were working in the garage one day, and for my dad's sound business, we were constructing something, and my dad had a heater, and we knew that it generated carbon monoxide, but it was cold outside, so we kept the garage door shut, and we even said, if anybody feels nauseous or tired or anything, say something and we will open this door right up, because that means gotta get it out. Because, once again, it's odorless, it's tasteless, and a lot of people think, I'm just tired. You're not tired. You're essentially asphyxiating, and you don't realize it. So, make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector, and make sure it's actually near the source. I mean, don't put it right next to it, because then it's just going to obviously pick up, right? But you don't want the carbon monoxide to be, like in my house, in the kitchen, but then put it in the bedroom all the way over here, because by the time it gets over here, the whole house has probably been filled. So we kind of keep it in the middle, like in the dining room, in the middle of our house. That way, it's the big room, but that way if the big room's getting detected, we know we need to get out of the house.
So, moving off of the extreme cold tips from the National Weather Service, LL Bean, a clothing and outdoor company, also had some tips for those that like to camp in the winter. And I am one of those people. I really enjoy the hammock camping. However, in the winter, I generally take the hammock down because all that cold air blowing under you is never going to fix itself.
Nope.
And they do make warm weather hammocks, but I prefer a tent when it's this cold out. So some tent tips when you are out and about in the winter. Use a smaller tent. This is going to keep all of that body heat irradiating in more. There's not enough room for it to spread out. Keep the warmth in and let vapor out, so zip up the windows and doors to keep your body heat in the tent.
When you mentioned camping, that reminded me, a lot of people when they go camping in the woods or anywhere during when it's snowing, they say, if we run out of water, we can just drink the snow, which is true. Yes, they say that, yes, it could have bacteria, but 99% of the time you can treat that with just some antibiotics. But if you're going to eat or drink snow, it's important to melt it or warm it up first, because if you just eat snow, like straight up snow, yes. Is it going to hydrate you? Yes. However, it is now cooling your core. And what a lot of people don't realize is keeping your core warm is more important than keeping your extremities and your outside warm, because your core is what generates the heat that it then spreads to your body. So by eating straight up snow, you're cooling down your core, and that's going to affect the rest of your body's heat distribution.
Another one of the tips is to bring a sleeping bag rated for colder than the forecast. Mine is rated to negative 20 degrees. It is a big sleeping bag, but I have never been warmer on a cold night in my life than the night I had that thing in there. Their ratings are based on the temperature outside. It's always a good idea to pick a sleeping bag that's rated for colder than the forecast. If it's going to get down to 40 degrees, consider a 20-degree bag, and so on. You can always unzip the bag if you're too warm. A lot of them, I know Coleman came out with one that I have that's a really good one. It comes out in layers, so I can go off one and stay warm with another. And when you do have a sleeping bag, make sure you insulate yourself in the sleeping bag, also from the ground. So the air is cold, the ground is even colder. Insulation, like sleeping bag lining, is a good idea. Also, a ground sheet underneath the tent to keep the tent a little warmer. And then above the tent, you have a pad. I know I have a pad with air in it, which the cold air just seeps right into that. So I always wrap it in a bigger blanket so that it's still doing what it's supposed to, but it's also insulating itself.
Yeah. Always really just bring more than what you need, right? Because like you said, like warm clothing, for example. I can always take off clothing, but I can't put on more clothing I didn't have with me.
Yes.
So if I get cold or too hot, I can simply take it off. And also make sure you have, if you're hiking or you're going outside and you're going to be outside for a longer period of time, make sure you have like spare socks, spare gloves, because if you're working, your feet are going to really heat up because that's where all the sweat's going to drip. Your gloves, since if you're working outside, you're going to be moving a lot of snow. Now your gloves are wet. If they're cloth gloves, well, once again, that is now, freezing your fingers. So, like small pieces of clothing like that, whenever possible, make sure you have at least one backup pair. That way, right when you're done with working or during your break, you can take them off, put the dry pair on, and let your hands get a break from all the cold. So I think it's important because whether you are going outside temporarily or working, I think frostbite is definitely is a serious concern because if it gets too bad, you can lose fingers, arms, ears, noses. So the typical signs of frostbite early on are, well, obviously your hand is very, very cold. You'll find that it's hard to move. Your skin looks pale because all the blood is essentially getting drained. It's numb. It's hard. When you're, if you've been outside before, when your hands start like feeling like it's hard, your fingers aren't as squishy.
You can't type. Your thumbs.
You can't type because your thumbs, they're stiff. Yeah, that's a sign you need to warm up your hands. And do not dunk your hands or someone suffering from frostbite anywhere. Do not place them in direct heat. That will, in a simple term, because not in the medical phrasing, that will kind of shock the body and it won't know what to do. You actually want to slowly warm them up. Let the body adjust to the new temperatures, and even if it's cold water, because that cold water that coming from your sink is probably still warmer than the water outside. And then slowly increase the heat. And as we're talking about that, I kind of want to talk about a myth I found when I heard about dealing with frostbite. And
I'm ready.
Don't drink alcohol. Do not drink alcohol when it's cold outside.
That was really random.
I know that sounds random, but you would not believe how many people were like, well, when I drink alcohol when it's cold outside, I always feel warm. I always feel warmer. And yes, you do, but it's an illusion.
It doesn't change anything.
Because what it actually does is, I'm pretty sure I don't remember the scientific term, but I think it like thins your blood, or it causes your blood vessels to open again instead of like contract to keep in heat. So they open, so then you feel that rush of heat. But what you don't realize is that rushing of heat is actually the heat from your core going to your arms. And as we discussed earlier, it is more important to keep your core warm than your extremities. So when you drink alcohol, you feel warm, but now instead of freezing from the outside in, you're now freezing from the inside out. So I know that kind of came out of nowhere, but when I heard about that, I just had to bring it up. So yeah, if you're freezing or someone's suffering from frostbite, do not give them alcohol.
So going off of that, one of I think the last one that I've got here actually is enjoy some warm food and drink. There is no better time than when it's cold outside to have soup, to have hot chocolate. I know I am a sucker for hot chocolate. Every night I would have it.
Oh, my family, we have like our own special recipe, like to the point where like the blender or whatever mixer like my mom was using, when it finally broke, we spent like years looking for a replacement, like the perfect replacement. Like it had to be able to mix this at this temperature because just the way we made it was.
So some of the great ideas for that are stew, potato soup, vegetable soup, chili. I'm a big fan of chili. So just those kind of things that are going to keep your internal furnace warmer, because that is what's going to keep the rest of your body warm.
All right, and I think the last thing we need to cover is the big factor of cold, or biggest symptom of cold, hypothermia.
Yep.
That is basically extreme frostbite, for lack of a better phrase. Symptoms include shivering, exhaustion or feeling tired, confusion, fumbling of hands, memory loss, slurred speech, drowsiness, and a whole lot others. if you see somebody who appears to be suffering from hypothermia, once again, just like with frostbite, slowly warm them up. And at one point, you know, what a lot of people don't realize is at one point if you're suffering from hypothermia, people are like, I suddenly start feeling warmer.
Yeah.
And they'll start taking off their clothes because they're like, I'm so hot. Nope, you need to keep those on. I know we discussed earlier, if you're feeling too hot, take them off. No, if you've been outside for very long and you can tell like your fingers are starting to feel weird and you're feeling hot, you know, keep your clothes on. Now, you might be in a confused mental state. So if you see somebody and they were complaining about being super, super cold, right? If they were complaining about cold and now they're complaining about being hot, keep their clothes on. Like, even if you have to pin them down and like hold them to prevent them from taking off.
And if you're holding them, they might actually warm up a little bit.
Yeah.
In the real way.
Yeah. So don't let them take their clothes off. And once again, get them somewhere dry. If possible, change their clothing, right? Because that wet clothes, right? It's just keeping water in. Slowly warm them up like we discussed with frostbite and get them to the hospital and make sure they're not going to suffer any lasting effects. But I really just cannot emphasize enough of make sure they keep their clothes on, because the hypothermia victims, they always take off their clothes because they think they're warm and they're getting hot. And once again, the hypothermia affects their mind. They're not in the right mental state. They don't realize that, yes, you're feeling warm, but it's actually because you're freezing to death. And it's basically your body's last-ditch effort to warm up your outside. And once again, it's more important to keep your core warm than your extremities. And your body's doing a last-ditch effort. And if that last-ditch effort doesn't get fixed soon, it is often fatal. So we didn't really want to, hopefully we didn't bum you guys out too much before the holidays. And, you know, I hope you find this informative. We will post some links of these survival tips and resources and some lists in the description of this video. So kind of give you guys the sparkle notes of this conversation today. We kind of gave you the tips of why they were important and what they were. But hopefully the sparkle notes will be just, instead of a 30-minute video of us explaining all the ways you can die in a
You can just read the 6 tips online. Just read the 6. LLB.
Just
as
food,
always,
blanket, clothes. Yeah.
As always, thanks so much for listening. And very specific to this topic, make sure it's getting cold, so stay safe out there.
Yep, stay safe. See you in the next video.